Imagine you live your entire life inside this massive, impenetrable fortress.
Okay.
Like the walls are miles high, the gates are locked tight, and, the rules governing who actually gets to be inside are just incredibly strict.
Right. It's totally exclusive.
Exactly. And you've been told from the day you were born that the outside world is dangerous, that the people out there are fundamentally different from you, and that keeping those towering walls intact is, well, the only way to honor the architect who built the place.
Because the fortress provides safety, right? It
Yeah.
provides this rigid structure where you know exactly who is in, who is out, and what the boundaries are.
Yeah. But then, one random Tuesday, that same architect taps you on the shoulder, hands you a sledgehammer, and just says, tear it down.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Tear the whole thing down.
Whoa.
We're throwing the doors wide open, and everyone is invited in.
That is, that is the absolute definition of a paradigm shift.
It really is. And that is exactly the mission for our deep dive today. Welcome. Because today, we're exploring the exact moment in history when an incredibly exclusive religious system completely dismantled its own boundaries.
It's such a wild story, too.
It is. And we have a really fascinating stack of sources guiding us through this collision of worlds for you today. First, we are looking at the historical accounts in the Acts of the Apostles, and specifically, we're utilizing the Catholic public domain version of the Bible.
Right, the CPTV.
Yeah, and the reason we're looking at this particular modern literal translation is that it refuses to soften the stark, raw language of the original text. Because, when ancient, rigid barriers are being shattered, you really want to read the precise words used to swing the hammer.
Absolutely. And we are also pulling some really striking visual and contextual details from an illustrated graphic narrative of Acts chapter 10.
Which is so helpful.
It really is. It helps ground these ancient events in a very physical, relatable reality. And then to tie it all together, we have a modern sermon transcript by Gary Hamrick. That source provides the deep historical and theological context necessary to understand just how scandalous this shift truly was.
So scandalous. And the characters driving this history are incredible. We're going to look at a highly powerful foreign official reading ancient scrolls in the middle of a blazing desert.
A Roman centurion who discovers that having the resume of a saint actually isn't quite good enough.
Right, and a hungry, stubborn apostle who experiences this bizarre, perspective-shattering vision on a flat rooftop.
Yeah, but, to understand the sheer scale of the dam breaking in Acts 10, we really first have to look at the initial crack in the structure.
Oh, that's a good point.
Because in the early chapters of the Acts of the Apostles, the followers of Jesus were entirely Jewish. The message, the fellowship, the theology, all of it was kept strictly within that cultural and religious boundary.
Yeah, it was an insulated community.
Totally. But then, in Acts chapter 8, the narrative introduces the sudden anomaly. An angel of the Lord gives a very specific, almost nonsensical instruction to a man named Philip,
Right.
telling him to rise up and go south to a desert road that descends from Jerusalem to Gaza.
Which, that is not exactly a prime location for preaching.
No, not at all.
You're not running into large crowds in a desert.
Yeah.
But Philip goes, and he encounters an Ethiopian man. And our sources highlight that this is not just some random traveler seeking shade.
No, this guy is a big deal.
A huge deal.
Right.
This man is a eunuch of immense power. He is essentially the chief financial officer for an empire. The text says he's the treasurer in charge of all the wealth of Candace, the queen of the Ethiopians.
Right. And he's traveling in a chariot.
Yes,
Yeah.
which is the ancient equivalent of, like, a luxury armored vehicle.
Yeah.
And he had actually traveled all the way up to Jerusalem to worship.
And the juxtaposition the text presents here is just fascinating.
How so?
Well, you have a man with incredible status, immense wealth, and political power. Yet, as he's running back home, he's reading a scroll of the ancient prophet Isaiah, which, by the way, was an incredibly expensive item to own in the ancient world.
Oh, I bet.
And he is completely stumped. He realizes he doesn't understand what he's reading, and he is actually willing to admit it.
I was thinking about this dynamic. It's like a modern-day Fortune 500 CEO, someone who makes billion-dollar decisions before breakfast,
Right.
sitting in the back of a luxury town car, and he just pulls over to ask a guy walking on the side of the road to explain a philosophy book to him.
That's a perfect way to picture it.
He has all the authority in the world, but he possesses the humility to know he doesn't have all the answers. So Philip obliges. He explains that the scriptures the eunuch is reading are actually predicting Jesus. And the eunuch's response is instantaneous.
No, he doesn't hesitate.
They pass by some water in this arid region, and the eunuch simply asks, "What prevents me from being baptized?"
He literally orders the chariot to halt right there.
Yeah.
He declares his belief with his whole heart. They go down into the water, and Philip baptizes him.
Wow.
And then the narrative states that the Spirit of the Lord suddenly takes Philip away, leaving the eunuch to continue his journey rejoicing.
Okay, wait, hold on. Because if I'm looking at the historical context of this intensely exclusive religious system, I have to ask you this. Why is an angel explicitly routing a Jewish preacher to chase down a foreign official in a literal desert?
It's a great question.
I mean, this man is an outsider by every conceivable metric.
He really is. But the text portrays this as the initial ripple of a massive wave. The theological criteria were shifting dramatically behind the scenes.
So,
The narrative demonstrates that a seeking, humble heart was beginning to take precedence over nationality, over physical status, or, the traditional boundaries of who was permitted into the community.
I see.
The eunuch was an outsider, absolutely, but his desire for the truth overrode those ancient cultural metrics.
That makes a lot of sense. But, the eunuch's conversion was this quiet, isolated incident on a desert road.
Right. Nobody saw it happen.
Exactly. It proved the theology was expanding, sure, but theology eventually has to survive contact with society.
Yeah, the real world.
And the real test of this new openness, it couldn't happen out in a desert. It had to happen in the very center of the geopolitical conflict.
Oh, uh-huh.
And that brings us to Acts chapter 10, the official permanent turning point,
The big one.
the big one. And it centers on a man named Cornelius.
Cornelius is arguably one of the most pivotal figures in this entire history. He lives in Caesarea, which is this bustling coastal city.
Okay.
And the graphic narrative we're using, it opens with a really vivid illustration of him standing on a balcony looking out over the great blue sea wearing full Roman armor. The text identifies him as a centurion commanding the prestigious Italian regiment.
Which, we have to note, carries massive geopolitical weight.
Oh, massive.
Cornelius is not just a foreigner. He is the occupying force. To the local Jewish population, the Italian regiment represents oppression, heavy taxes, military dominance.
Yeah, he is the face of the empire that controls their daily lives.
He's the ultimate enemy of the state in the eyes of the local populace. Yet despite all that, the text goes out of its way to describe his character in glowing terms.
It really does.
It identifies him as a devout man who feared God. He gave generously to the poor. He prayed constantly. The graphic narrative even notes that the local people actually respected him.
Right.
He is the anomaly. He's an occupier who loves the God of the occupied.
And then, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the 9th hour, he has a vision. An angel of God comes to him and tells him that his prayers and his generosity have ascended as a memorial before God.
Which sounds incredible.
It does. But then the angel instructs him to send men 30 miles south to the town of Joppa to find a man named Simon Peter who is staying by the sea with a panner.
Okay, if I am reading this, I'm thinking Cornelius has already cracked the code, right?
Right, you'd think so.
He's devout, he's generous, he prays constantly. He literally has the resume of a saint. So why is an angel telling him he needs to send men on a 2-day journey to find some preacher?
Well, the sermon transcript by Gary Hamrick really unpacks the theology behind this exact dilemma. Hamrick argues that Cornelius represents a psychological trap that remains very, very common today.
What trap is that?
The belief that human goodness is sufficient. Hamrick notes that from a biblical theological standpoint, the human race has already been evaluated, and the finding is that no one is perfectly righteous.
Okay.
Every person has flaws and guilt. Therefore, according to this framework, you cannot earn your way to heaven simply by stacking up a high score of good deeds.
Right.
Hamrick stresses that Jesus didn't die for good people, he died for sinners who need grace.
I was trying to wrap my head around that mechanism, and it feels like someone applying for a highly technical, specialized job.
Oh, I like that.
Like you could have a glowing resume, you have incredible soft skills, you're a team player, everyone loves you, you spend your weekends volunteering.
You're great on paper.
You are objectively the nicest candidate in the world. But if you are applying to be an airline pilot and you lack the one mandatory certification, an actual pilot's license,
Right.
you simply cannot get the job.
Exactly.
Your goodness, no matter how vast, does not bypass the technical requirement.
That's spot on. Cornelius had all the soft skills. He was genuinely devout and generous, but according to the theology presented here, he lacked the required certification, which is a relationship with the Savior to forgive his sins.
I see.
Human goodness cannot replace divine grace. He needed the specific message that Peter was carrying to bridge that gap.
So Cornelius immediately obeys the vision. He sends 2 servants and a devout soldier on a 30-mile trek south along the coast to Joppa. Cornelius is entirely ready to hear the message.
He's all in.
But the narrative cuts to the messenger Peter and reveals that the establishment is absolutely not ready to deliver it.
Not even close.
The religious gatekeepers require a massive ego check before they will even consider opening the door.
And this brings us to Peter's rooftop experience. It's the next day, around noon, the 6th hour. Peter's messengers are getting close to the city limits of Joppa, and Peter goes up to the flat rooftop of the house to pray.
Right.
The graphic narrative illustrates him sitting up there in the oppressive midday sun. And the text notes a very relatable human detail. He became very hungry and wanted to eat.
I love that detail.
Yeah.
So while lunch is being prepared downstairs, he falls into a trance. The text describes heaven opening up, and a great container, resembling a massive linen sheet bound at its 4 corners, is lowered down to the earth.
Yeah.
And inside this sheet is an absolute chaotic zoo. 4-footed animals, wild beasts, creeping things, and birds.
Just a mix of everything, and a voice comes from heaven and commands, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat."
And Peter, speaking directly to the divine voice of God, flat out refuses.
Right to God's face.
Yes. He says, "Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything common or unclean." He is a strict, law-abiding Jewish man who has adhered to centuries of dietary restrictions.
Yep.
And the voice replies with a line that fundamentally alters history. It says, "What God has cleansed, you must not call common." And this exact exchange repeats 3 times before the sheet is pulled back up to heaven.
3 times?
Now, I gotta say, if I am Peter, I am feeling incredibly slighted right now.
Really? Why?
Well, I have followed these strict dietary rules my entire life. I have denied myself, I have been obedient to the very letter of the law to honor God, and now this divine voice is scolding me for doing exactly what I was taught to do. Doesn't that seem a bit unfair?
It does seem unfair at first glance, and the disorientation Peter feels is exactly what makes paradigm shifts so painful.
Okay.
To understand why Peter reacts so strongly and why the voice pushes back, we have to look at the mechanism of those ancient laws.
Lay it on me.
The Hamrick source provides a really helpful breakdown, categorizing the Old Testament laws into 3 areas: moral, ceremonial, and dietary. Now, the moral code directives on justice, ethics, how you treat your neighbor, that remains constant. But Hamrick argues the dietary and ceremonial laws had a very specific sociological function.
They were designed to keep the Jewish people distinct from the surrounding nations, right?
Exactly. They were an intentional cultural barrier. Because think about it. If the people of Israel ate the exact same foods, attended the exact same pagan festivals, and lived exactly like the surrounding empires, they would simply assimilate.
They just disappear into the broader culture.
Exactly. The laws ensured they remained a distinct, preserved people group through which the message of the Messiah could eventually be revealed.
So they were like a protective measure.
Right. The rules were the scaffolding meant to protect the building while it was under construction. Furthermore, in the ancient world, sharing a meal was the ultimate sign of fellowship and acceptance.
Oh, that's true.
If your dietary laws prevent you from eating at someone else's table, you cannot deeply socialize with them, you cannot intermarry, and you remain entirely separate.
That makes total sense. But that cultural barrier worked a little too well over the centuries, didn't it?
It really did.
Because Hamrick points out that the separation calcified into intense exclusivity and pride. The historical context is actually quite brutal here.
Yeah, it gets dark.
Hamrick notes that in biblical times, many within the religious establishment believed that Gentiles were completely excluded from God's love, to the point where they literally referred to outsiders as, quote, fuel for the fires of hell.
Wow. Yeah, the prejudice ran incredibly deep. So when Peter refuses to eat the animals on that roof, he isn't just turning down a non-kosher meal, he is recoiling at the very concept of associating with the outside world.
He's rejecting them.
Exactly. But the text is declaring that the paradigm shift has arrived. The Messiah had come. The message was complete. Therefore, the protective boundaries had served their purpose.
The scaffolding could come down.
Exactly. The scaffolding around the building was no longer necessary, and the vision of the sheet was God's way of handing Peter the sledgehammer to tear it down.
What God has cleansed, you must not call common.
So powerful.
The divine voice wasn't just talking about the creeping things in the linen sheet. It was talking about the people Cornelius sent. Because at the exact moment Peter is sitting on that hot roof, utterly confused about the theology he just witnessed, Cornelius's men arrive at the gate downstairs.
Perfect timing. The text describes the Spirit speaking to Peter, telling him 3 men are looking for him and that he needs to go with them, doubting nothing because the Spirit sent them.
So Peter goes downstairs, and he invites these Gentile strangers into a Jewish home to lodge for the night, which, by the way, is already shattering ancient protocol right there.
Just that action alone is huge.
Right. And the next day, they travel the 30 miles back up the coast to Caesarea. The two vastly different worlds are about to collide.
And when Peter arrives, he discovers that Cornelius hasn't just been waiting quietly by himself.
No, he brought a crowd.
He eagerly gathered his entire extended family and his closest friends. The room is absolutely packed with Romans, waiting for whatever message God is going to deliver through this Jewish man.
And the moment Peter walks through the door, Cornelius, this powerful, authoritative Roman military commander, falls down at Peter's feet and tries to worship him.
He's just totally starstruck by the messenger.
He really is.
But Peter's reaction is immediate. He lifts Cornelius up and says, "Stand up, for I also am only a man."
Good response.
And the Hamrick source shares a really memorable anecdote here about the danger of elevating humans in this way.
Oh, about the statue.
Yes. Hamrick mentions that in Vatican City, inside St. Peter's Basilica, there is a famous bronze statue of the Apostle Peter from the 13th century.
Okay.
And over the centuries, so many millions of pilgrims have walked by, bowed, and reverently kissed or touched the feet of the statue that the toes on his right foot have literally been rubbed completely smooth.
That is insane.
It is. And Hamrick quips that what they really need over there is a tow truck.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
It's a great dad joke. But the underlying point of that humor is profound. The narrative insists that we do not worship the messengers because the message grants direct access to the architect.
Right.
Peter refuses to be elevated. He stands eye to eye with Cornelius as an equal.
I love that.
Mm.
Peter then addresses the crowded room, and he admits out loud just how radical his presence there is. He says, you know how abominable it would be for a Jewish man to be joined with or to be added to a foreign people.
He just calls out the elephant in the room.
He does. He acknowledges the invisible wall that has separated them for centuries. But then he declares the shift. He says, but God has revealed to me to call no man common or unclean.
The light bulb finally clicked.
It did. He finally understands the meaning of the zoo on the linen sheet. He realizes the divine criteria show no favoritism.
So Peter steps up to deliver the message Cornelius has been waiting for. And what's really striking here is how brief it is.
Oh, it's so short.
It's not a 3-hour theological lecture. It is a highly condensed 1-minute summary of Jesus' life, his healing, his crucifixion, his resurrection, and the promise of forgiveness of sins for whoever believes.
He just delivers the core, unadorned message. And the text describes the response from heaven as instantaneous.
Yeah, doesn't wait.
The narrative details something wild happening next. Before Peter even finishes his short sermon, the text states that the Holy Spirit suddenly falls on all the Gentiles listening in the room.
Right in the middle of it.
Right in the middle. And the Jewish believers who traveled with Peter are standing there absolutely astonished, hearing these Roman occupiers speaking in tongues and praising the God of Israel.
The narrative presents this as God proving that the old rules no longer apply. God did not wait for Peter to finish his outline. He didn't wait for a formal altar call, and he didn't require Cornelius to go through years of Jewish ceremonial training to prove his worth.
You know, it makes me think of a university professor standing at the front of a lecture hall on the very first day of class.
Okay, I'm with you.
Before the professor even finishes writing the syllabus on the chalkboard, the dean of the university walks in and just starts handing out fully accredited graduation diplomas to the entire room.
That is exactly what it's like.
Right. Like no final exams, no prerequisites, no navigating the registrar's office. It completely bypassed the institutional red tape. It proved that grace was dictating the terms now, not human tradition.
And Peter recognizes that he cannot stand in the way of what heaven has already approved. He looks around the room and asks, can anyone forbid water? That these should not be baptized who have received the Holy Spirit just as we have.
Amazing.
And without hesitation, Cornelius and his entire household are baptized.
The wall is gone. The fortress is open. Wow. Okay, let's recap the incredible ground we have covered today.
We've covered a lot.
We really have. We started by looking at an Ethiopian official who found answers on a desert road, demonstrating that a seeking heart transcends social and political status.
Then we explored the tension of a devout Roman centurion in Caesarea, learning that human goodness, no matter how admirable or disciplined, cannot replace the need for divine grace.
Yes. And we watched A rigid, traditional apostle being forced to lay down centuries of religious pride and exclusivity, learning on a hot rooftop that love cannot be confined to one specific group of people.
Because the conversion was never just about Cornelius.
Right.
It was equally about Peter and the establishment converting to a completely new way of seeing humanity. It was an earth-shattering shift. But,
Mhm.
it leaves you with a very different kind of question to mull over today.
It really does. Because the historical boundaries have fallen, but human nature remains the exact same. It
Exactly.
makes you wonder about the boundaries we build today. I mean, we might not have ancient dietary laws keeping us from sharing a table with certain people, but we do have digital algorithms and curated news feeds.
Oh, yeah.
We live in these custom-built algorithmic echo chambers that act as our modern purity laws, neatly separating us from anyone who thinks, votes, or lives differently than we do.
That's a scary thought.
It is. If a 2,000-year-old paradigm shift required throwing the doors completely open to the outside world, you have to ask yourself, what happens when we let our own algorithms keep those doors firmly shut?
A question about our invisible walls that is just as relevant today as it was in the first century.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the sources. We'll catch you on the next one.